So today I'm going to be talking about advanced technical SEO and about JavaScript SEO and technology behind Googlebot, so everything that makes Google crawl our website. It doesn't work. So in February this year, I was talking about technical SEO and how to deliver outstanding results with technical SEO. And in the same very room, I was talking about that. But then this was true, but what I didn't know at the time is that I'm just touching a tip of an iceberg. Because as my research continued throughout the last months, I realized how much we don't know as SEOs about how Google works, how technical SEO works, and I realized that we know nothing. And most of the stuff that we know comes from either Google's announcements, Google's patents, or tweets, Google Webmaster Central, Google Blog, and stuff like that. But the problem is that most of those sources would contradict each other in some way, and this leads us to do a lot of educated guessing instead of actual research. And Tom Anthony from Distilled did a very cool, Jonas friend here. So they do a lot of work with A/B testing, and as one of the examples, they proved that image ads have no impact on rankings whatsoever, and we still advise developers to push that as one of the examples of bad use of our time. And this all comes from the problem that as SEOs, we're always trying to work with too many projects, we have too much stuff to get to the bottom, to the problem. And I had that vision, seeing that over the years, I've changed how we interact with our clients completely. My main goals was to avoid the rush and to get to the bottom of all the problems. Our goal as an agency was to make every single client of ours a case study. That worked very well in the short term. We had a lot of extremely nice case studies. But what seemed like a solid idea at the time quickly backfired because we became overwhelmed with so much research, so much case studies, so much experiments that I spent last 3 years going through all that to basically understand what's happening with some of our clients. And let me tell you a story about that. And as with most of the stories, we need a hero, in this case someone you hopefully care about, an obstacle, and a pot of gold. That's a very basic storytelling idea. In this case, our hero is a stubborn Polak or Polak. I'm not sure how you guys call it. And as a hero of this story, my background is in psychology. I'm a master's of psychology, and I want to understand how technical SEO works. And I don't have the background for that, and I never wrote a single line of code in my life. And here comes the obstacle as well. And I want to be rich and famous, but at the same time, I can't understand how JavaScript crawling works. And there's a pot of gold, but we'll get there in a minute. So the story of my JavaScript research started a while ago, but like the real beginning was in 2016, last year, when I saw Hulu.com dropping. It was actually here in Berlin at one of the trainings where I noticed that they're dropping. I started looking into that, and I started my research. And I realized that they dropped because of the JavaScript. The client rendered JavaScript they launched on Hulu.com. And as my research continued, I realized, okay, there is no data about JavaScript SEO out there. There's this famous claim from Google that they're generally able to render and understand your web pages like modern browsers, which is not really true. And again, I don't know JavaScript, and I'm not a front-end developer, but even even if I were a developer, that wouldn't really change much because that wasn't the key problem here, and there is no data out there. So I spent the last few months trying to understand JavaScript SEO in detail, again, just to realize there is no data out there. I was actually stuck with my research, and before I continue, I'm gonna, like, just so everyone is on the same page, I'm gonna explain what the problem with JavaScript is. So that the key problem with HTML, it's fairly easy. Googlebot or Google Web Rendering service just has to look at the HTML to understand and render it properly. With JavaScript, it's not like that at all. There has to be a little bit of magic to change HTML to change JavaScript into HTML, so it can be understood by Googlebot or browser properly. And that's where all the problems come in, because that's a very time-consuming, resources-consuming process. And if you're wondering why JavaScript is important for you, actually, if you came to this track, I can actually assume that you know, but everyone is moving towards JavaScript, single-page apps, PWAs and stuff like that. Like, that's a huge movement. We have so many clients coming our way. Even some of the biggest players in e-commerce are moving towards JavaScript, so that's difficult to avoid right now. And back in April or May this year, I created my first JavaScript SEO experiment. Some of you probably heard about that. It's very, very simple. I checked how Googlebot and how Google is crawling and indexing different frameworks. Those are just selected frameworks. There's like many more. And I saw there are some differences between these frameworks. And this experiment was extremely popular. Like, it got so much traction. It got a shitload of links, like 360 referring domains, almost 1,000 backlinks. But what's actually interesting, this experiment was wrong. It wasn't, like, there was a lot of stuff that could be done a little bit better. But we didn't know that at the time. Like, we were the first ones to go this way. So back then, this wasn't our pot of gold. This wasn't what I was looking for, because quickly after publishing the experiment, I saw that Google crawls different frameworks and different configurations in different ways. So I saw that there is a clear pattern of what's going on. So I knew that I have to dig a little bit deeper. So I could do only one thing. I decided to intensify my research even more. And I created a few more experiments just to get to the bottom of the problem, like JavaScript versus crawler budget, to see how JavaScript affects crawler budget, how Google is crawling and indexing single-page apps, because they're pushing them hard. So I was trying to see if that works properly. Features supported by Googlebot, because like Googlebot has features that they support as well with Modernizer. And I added a few more frameworks to JavaScript SEO.expert. And actually, interesting thing happened. After I published this experiment, John Miller created a forum where he would support JavaScript websites. So that was very nice of him to react to it this way. And I reached out to John Miller with my questions. And I threw all the data I wasn't sure about John's way. So there was this pattern of externally hosted JavaScripts with all the different frameworks. It wasn't just jQuery that weren't crawled. So basically, every single time that JavaScript wasn't inline, but just was an external file, Googlebot wouldn't crawl those URLs. And I shared all my concerns with John Miller, and quickly got a reply from him. And the reply was nothing that I expected, because he mentioned that they haven't crawled it. They saw all the URLs. As you see, they're all external. So they saw all the URLs, but they haven't crawled them yet. They didn't feel like crawling them yet. And again, not crawled yet. So he didn't give me any specific reason for that. And John Miller's feedback got me thinking about why this all happened. I knew that something isn't right. His feedback, I didn't think he understood me fully, and his feedback wasn't technical enough. Like, it was far from, close on, it was far from what I expected. So as with every single good story out there, I started looking for someone to help me out, for a guide or a guru of some kind. And I started investigating Google's structure to find people with more technical background. And this guy would pop up quite often. His name is Ilya Grigorik. He's an extremely smart guy. He also works at Google. And I figured, okay, I'm going to find his private email and ask him all these questions, because obviously there wasn't forum created by Ilya Grigorik. So I started stalking him a little bit and emailing him all my questions. And what actually surprised me, he replied to me quite soon. He looked into my Google Doc with all my questions, and he became my guide within like a couple of hours. And I sent all my concerns his way. And straight away, after looking at the experiment, he saw that something is off, that something doesn't work right. And before I'm going to give you that something, you guys need to understand the exact technology powering Googlebot to crawl our websites. And that's the key thing is web rendering system, actually service, sorry. And like as every single browser, Googlebot has their features and limitations. So there are things that they support and things that they won't support. And there are different protocols used for crawling. So you guys need to understand that before moving forward to understand Ilya's feedback. And the key problem that we have in our community is that we as SEOs have no idea how Googlebot crawls our websites. So we would spend a lot of time on Google patents and stuff like that, but we don't really understand that technology. So here, Ilya Grigorik saves the day again. And a few months ago, he tweeted about web rendering, about Chrome 41 powering web rendering service, so WRS. And that was a game changer, because we know exactly which version of Chrome is used to build Googlebot. So if you want to play with that, you can just download Chrome 41 here. This one is actually for Windows. I found one for Mac, but I lost the link, so I couldn't find it. Like, it's really difficult. But that's Chrome 41 for Windows. And all you have to do is open any website that doesn't work properly. This one is actually fixed, which we're going to get to in a minute. But open any website that you don't think is crawled and indexed properly. If it's not indexed properly, it's also not going to work well in Chrome 41. So, going back to our story, I found Ilya as my guide, but as every single, as it usually happens, Ilya wouldn't give me any specific solutions. He was leaving tips and puzzles for me to figure out. And he was very cryptic, and his feedback was technical, but wasn't very easy to understand sometimes. So one of his favorite quotes was, "JavaScript is not bad for SEO if done right." Okay, that's fine. But then he would go geekier, and he would say that HTML is very forgiving, but JavaScript less so. That's fine. But then he would just go geeky on me and go technical about the problems with some of the frameworks we have. So he would say that the syntax is the problem, and we can debug it and stuff like that. So I didn't get it that time because I didn't have technical feedback, so I had to learn Ilya's style to like speak the same language. I knew he's giving me tips towards my first pot of gold, and I wanted to make the most of it. So after investigating all of Ilya's clues, we managed to get Angular 2nd, which maybe you saw on the tab wasn't indexed by Google in the first place. So we've managed to fix that after getting a lot of feedback from Ilya. How did we do it? And that's actually quite funny because you probably know that Angular is also made by Google. So there was an error in Angular source code in the official repository we used for our experiment. So it wasn't Google's search team that would fuck up, it was Google's Angular team that would create this problem. And they fixed it on April 26th, and after we uploaded the fixed version, then Angular 2 would be indexable again. So that was actually fairly easy. With all the different frameworks like Polymer that weren't indexed originally, we also repeated the same workflow to get them indexed in Google. So as you can see, this experiment wasn't really right. Like, the idea was okay, but we didn't get to the bottom of the problem. So Google didn't index AngularJS at the beginning, but it wasn't because Google's engine was wrong. It was because the framework wasn't built properly. And now we're going to get to something that's really interesting. There were 20,000 people that looked at this experiment over the last few months. At the same time, I reached out to probably more than 100 people over different conferences all around the world, and a lot of technical people, a lot of Googlers, and no one saw any problem with the experiment. But I didn't like that something. I knew that I had to dig a little bit deeper, and the reason for that is not that because those people weren't smart enough, because some of them were like really, really good. But until now, there was no workflow to troubleshoot JavaScript indexing properly. Don't say indexation in front of some of the technical guys. It's indexing. So that was like hidden joke for geeks. So if we look at JavaScript forum and a lot of people going there, like John Miller helping out, it didn't help at all. At the same time, quick one-on-one with my mentor here, like with Ilya, helped us index all the frameworks properly within like 10 minutes. So there's a huge difference in expertise of different people in Google. So now we can make every single JavaScript frameworks or framework and library. Also, like if you want to piss off some of the JavaScript guys, just say that React is a framework. They love it. Just try it. So how to make it indexable? It's actually fairly easy after you know this workflow. And you can use Chrome 41. That's the only tool you can use to debug all the JavaScript indexing problems. So all you have to do is open Chrome 41 and go to any JavaScript client-rendered website and go to Chrome Developer Tools and look at the console here. So that's one of the examples. Polymer, actually, that's one of the frameworks where we did, like our developers did a little bit of mistakes as well. So if you look at those errors here, that's all you have to do. Basically, go to console, look at all the stuff in red, and show it to your developers. If they fix it, if there is no errors in the console in Google Chrome 41, your stuff should be indexable by Google. So right now we know that every single JS framework is indexable, and most of the indexing problems are made because JavaScript is not very forgiving with mistakes. And that's one of the quotes that Ilya gave me, that if you look at the problems behind all those frameworks, is because JavaScript is not that forgiving. So let me explain that, because I know what you all are thinking right now. How forgiving is HTML? And that was my first question after seeing this feedback. And I figured, okay, I'm going to write an example of very bad code. I wrote that for another conference like 2 days ago, just to check it. So if you write code with a lot of mistakes, save it as shitcode.html, it's going to work just fine if you open that in Chrome. And actually, interesting thing is, if we dig deeper, is if you click inspect, Chrome is going to fix all the code for you. So even if you write something that barely looks like HTML, Chrome is going to fix it completely and make it just very nice and proper. And at the same time, how forgiving is JavaScript? It's not going to forgive you any of the mistakes for you. Like, it's not going to work fine with most of the browsers. So what you have to do is basically go to Chrome 41 and look if there are not like, look at these problems here, because they will kill your rankings. But this led me to a little bit of a crossroads with Ilya Grigorik, because he helped me a lot, but I wasn't sure if he can get me to the next step, because he couldn't help me with one more problem I had, because I still have one key problem I can't solve, and it's JavaScript crawling. And that's still a huge problem, because we got to the moment where we can index every single framework, but they still aren't crawled as well as HTML. And all my research, all my experiments would show that JavaScript can kill your crawler budget. So that's actually pretty bad, because with all my experiments, even if I like Googlebot wouldn't crawl a lot of JavaScript links, and at the same time, even if I would create like really bad HTML website with poor content, every single time Google is going to go through that and index that within like an hour. So it became clear to me that Googlebot isn't as excited about JavaScript as it is about HTML. So I figured I'm going to create one more experiment to see if that's actually true. And that's one of many crawler budget experiments we created, because that's actually the moment we're actually stuck right now to understand that fully. So the workflow is fairly simple. If you like this is a website, you can get to page number 3 only by visiting homepage, page number 1, page number 2, and stuff like that. So if Googlebot would visit page number 3, I knew it visited page 1 and page 2. So with HTML, they crawl that within 1 hour and index that within 1 hour. With JavaScript, they would just go from homepage to page number 1, and after 6 months, it wouldn't go any deeper. And we repeated that with different frameworks, different configurations of those frameworks, because with JavaScript there is like a lot of different options. We repeated that with single page apps, which I'm not going to show you in detail today. With single page apps, it would actually stop here. Wouldn't even visit this page. So we repeated this experiment many times just to see that results are always the same. And my takeaway here is that JavaScript, even when indexable, can kill your crawler budget, and there is no other solution I would find as of today. But there is a lot of factors that would affect JavaScript crawling, and we need to dig a little bit deeper to understand them. And when my research continues, I realized that, okay, we focus a lot on crawler budget and technical SEO, but we don't really understand how browsers work. And Googlebot is a browser too. Like, in a way, I don't want to piss off some of the browser people here, if there are any, but Googlebot is a browser. It has also features and limitations. So there is a new trend emerging right now, and I want to talk about that for a second. And how many of you have seen this screen? Okay, for technical guys, I expected more, but I'm going to work with that. So that's a screen you see when you open Photoshop. And you can do a lot of stuff when this screen would show up. It's one of the most annoying screens for a lot of people. So you can learn to pronounce our agency name. It's Elephate, not Elefante or stuff like that. So that's one. Something I saw on a plane to Australia, which is really disgusting. And you can do 30 push-ups. Like we tested that in our office 2 weeks ago. And after all this waiting, you get this screen. And let me quote one of the Googlers here. There's only 2 possible interactions. You can only create blank canvas, or you can open an image. And you need to wait 30 seconds for just those two possible interactions for the whole website, for the whole app to load. And if you're going to create a website with similar experience, it's not going to go well with Google. With Photoshop, you can do that, and with users, not so much. So how to do it right? And let me show you an example of two websites where one is going Photoshop here, and second one is changing their ways. So Hulu and Netflix are one of the biggest competitors out there in States for, actually I think you have Netflix here in Germany as well. So Hulu is, I think they were first actually in States. So they're a similar size in States. There are two popular shows. So for casual, for Hulu that would be casual. For Netflix that would be Stranger Things. And let's have a look at GTmetrix here. So for Hulu, it's 20 seconds and 3 megabytes. For Netflix, it's 15 seconds and almost 60 megabytes. And which of those websites is faster? It's difficult to say because those metrics are really outdated. They're like really last season, and I wouldn't use them for benchmark. And let's play a quick game here. If you have fully loaded versus time to interactive, which I'm guessing Bastian is going to talk about in detail, you've got two options. Wait 8 seconds for fully loaded website, or wait 2 seconds for a website you can interact with. And this is actually how Hulu and Netflix would approach the same topic. So here, that's last announcement from Netflix from like a month ago or 2 months ago. They removed all the JavaScript from their website, even though they were using pre-render, so that wasn't a Google problem, just to see 50% performance improvement. And this is actually a guy who I stole the Photoshop example from. He's Jake Archibald from Google, and he wrote a whole article about this problem. If you want to read about that by following the link on the screen. So basically what Netflix did, and they removed all the JavaScript, actually all the React JavaScript from the client side just to improve the performance. And there is always going to be this workflow of every single JavaScript website, so it's going to be always much more complex if you have client-rendered JavaScript than HTML. There is no other option because that's basically how browser has to approach it. So Netflix switched from JavaScript to HTML and saw 50% improvement like overnight by just doing that. And let me show you an example with the first meaningful paint and the approach of Photoshop versus web apps. So Hulu on a slow, that's slow mobile, that's slow 3G on a mobile, you have to wait 20 seconds to see anything, and basically you would see the almost whole website launched straight away. With Netflix, you see first meaningful paint after like 4 seconds, and actually don't look at this first interactive because I checked and you can interact with this website straight away. So you can scroll or you can press play. So that's actually funny because PlayStation 4 implemented that in 2013, where you can play a game where just have a game you can play in where all the stuff is going to be downloaded while you play. So they just launch just enough for you to start playing, and then while you enjoy the game, they would download everything in the background. So that's very old. This technology is like 20 years old from what I researched recently. So Googlebot isn't as patient as Photoshop users, and I'm guessing that's the problem with JavaScript crawling, because you throw too much data at Googlebot. But anyways, my research continues, and that's not that's basically where I stopped recently. But everyone is moving towards either single page app, JavaScript, and we need to have that in mind because JavaScript is the future here, and whether we like it or not, it's gonna come. And I found, like, during my research, I've managed to gather a lot of data about next steps. So right now, Google isn't perfect with client-rendered JavaScript and single-page apps, but from Ilya Grigoryk's feedback, I know they're working on the new WRS engine. He didn't say that, but it's most likely going to be headless Chrome 59, which is a fairly new version of Chrome. This means that they will crawl and index JavaScript pages even better and faster. And I think they're going to improve this JavaScript crawling thing fairly soon. And this should happen most likely sometime, that's exact quote, in 2018. And at the very end, because I think I still have just 1 or 2 minutes, I have a very cool thing I came across during my research, and I think it's going to be quite exciting for the geeks in the room here. So let me prove that HTTP 1 can be exciting, and the next slide is going to change your life forever. That's my first slide, clickbait, but I think I need to do it more. So I checked, and on average, most websites would have like 149 requests to load a page. That would be average throughout top 1,000. And that would go to 64 images, 35 JavaScript, 16 HTML files, 4 CSS, and 2 fonts, which somehow equals 131. So let's stick with this number. Yeah. And the crawler's challenge is that I wrote an article about that, and I'm going to mention that in a second. Googlebot is using Speedy protocol, which only supports Chrome 1.1. And if we investigate that even further, it means that they have to split all the connections to 2 to 6 connections per server. At the same time, if you open modern Chrome, speed test, Metrics, and whatever, it's going to use HTTP 2, so there's going to be just 1 connection for all the requests. And if you look at how that affects an image, that's actually fast 3G connection on a desktop. That's a huge difference to load just 1 image. And just to give you one more example how that works, with HTTP2, there is just 1 request for all 131 requests. For HTTP 1.1, so for Googlebot, basically, they have to split it into a lot of smaller requests. Like, they have to queue it. So what you think can be a 3-second load can be a 10 seconds load for Googlebot. And for basically for Google. So I figured, okay, I'm going to email Ilya and ask him about this exact problem. And his reply was actually very interesting. He said that Blink is used for rendering, but he wouldn't assume those limits, so 2 to 6 requests are the same. So he's not sure how many requests are used by Googlebot. So that's something I'm going to have to investigate again. But again, those are not the same limits as with HTTP2 because they're using Speedy, which is very old technology. And I know you guys are excited about that, so just let me show you. Technology used by Googlebot is as old as iPhone 5, just to give you an example. And basically, they have to split the request to your website. So that can be one more thing affecting your crawling. You can read about that by following the link on the screen. But just to finish up, because I see that my time is up, experimenting means delivering results, just to show you that this doesn't really end on theory. And with going to the bottom of some of the problems, we've managed to have a lot of good case studies with our clients. But it also means, especially recently, reacting to changes. So when your client is dropping, you can react to that and get him back on track quickly. And sometimes you're going to be lucky, like we were with the coupon niche, and you can dominate it in all 35 countries by just basically creating one good move. Anyways, I still didn't find my pot of gold here. I'm still looking for a solution to some of my problems. And if you want to be a part of that, you can follow me or basically email me, say hi, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.